Welcome into the Checkerboard Chat. I am your co-sports editor, Ryan Cruz. Co-sports editor, Ryan Shumper, is not able to make it today. But today we're going to talk about the Vols, the Lady Vols, and some other sports that are going on here during this spring semester. But first off, we're talking about the Vols. They've had two big games since we've last talked, starting with Kansas. Kansas is always going to be one of the toughest teams you're going to face in college basketball. They're a great historical program. And this year's team was no different, even with the suspensions coming down with D'Souza and McCormick following the brawl at the end of the Kansas State game. Of course, Tennessee did not get the win, but Rick Barnes was definitely pleased with his team's play. He spoke before the game about how this is, how they've built this tough schedule, but because they want to challenge their players, but he acknowledged that this type of schedule is not built for the amount of minutes that the freshmen have played up to this point. But outside the freshmen, the top guys have been playing pretty well, especially the surprise. I wouldn't say surprise, but the improvement, the most improved player I would say this year has been John Fulkerson. Fulky last year was probably considered the eighth man on the roster. But definitely in the past couple games, but even this season has probably been one of, if not the best player on the team. And he's definitely stepped up following the graduation and declarement to the draft of Schofield and Grant and Bone. And even Rick Barnes talked about, Fulkerson's play after the game. We knew, this is his quote, we knew we were going into the game that we were going to go head up on Azubuike, and we were going to get him the ball and make him go at him. He did a fantabulous job, he really did, end quote. Fulkerson, he plays the game with a lot of intensity, and also Coach Barnes talked about how he's gotten to the point where he knows his mistakes. And he said that's a big deal. You got to know what you're doing wrong to be able to fix that. Another big player for the Vols has been Pons. Pons has filled really well into that second spot. Especially been big at blocks this year. Since coming back from the new semester, he's had 25 blocks in those 8 games, and has had at least one block every single game this year. A bit of a question mark at the top of the roster, I'd probably say, is Jordan Bowden. He can play really well if he has things going right. But as you saw in the first half of the Kansas game, he didn't score a single point. Now, Gray may not play a lot of minutes, but he showed you in that second half that he can do it when he put up those 19 points. But all around, the Kansas game was, granted they didn't get the win, but it set them up. They looked well. You set them up for a bit of a run down the schedule, which set them up well for the Texas A&M game. But as y'all know, in the Texas A&M game, they didn't continue that. They shot the ball well. Shooting a quite quality 46.7%. But, both coaches were very, very frank about it at the game. They didn't rebound well at all. Texas A&M dominated them, getting 46 rebounds, and to Tennessee's only 21. And especially on the offensive glass, Texas A&M out-rebounded them 23-4. You're just not going to do that and expect to get a win. Rick Barnes, after the interview, after the game, came out and said, I don't think if you can honestly expect with playing with that low of effort and not rebound how you even deserve to win the game. And so he seemed frustrated, but not frustrated in that, the Carson go his way. He's just frustrating his players. He's like, he was talking about how we were going on a good stretch, and we've proven that we can do what we need to do, but in that game they just didn't. And the huge thing that makes that a deflator is the Vols had just moved into the bubble for the tournament with that the close loss at Kansas, and they have a home and away with both Auburn and Kentucky, and if I remember correctly, they also go play at Florida. So they're not going to have any gimmies coming up in the next couple weeks, as they get more towards tournament time. And another thing, especially just coming up this weekend when they go to face Mississippi State, Texas A&M ranked in the KenPom rankings in the 130s when it comes to rebounding. For comparison, Mississippi State is second in the nation. So if Tennessee wants to have a shot, they're going to have to get things going. Continue. They have to play with that same intensity they played with in the Kansas game and the Ole Miss game. They have to play with that every single game. But another thing that I took out of the Texas A&M game was first time I got to really watch Buzz Williams. I was quite impressed with him as a head coach. I know it's kind of a topical, so you might maybe some confirmation bias in this. But my first reaction, at least after leaving the press room with Coach Williams, was a sort of a basketball Coach O. He's a little bit of a weird character, but he sat there as he was leaving the press room. He walked into Fulkerson, and we in the media, I tweeted about this the night of, got to overhear him with a conversation with Fulkerson. Listing out, going through, here's why you're good. You do X, Y, and Z. And I don't know if you know, but according to this metric, you're the most efficient player. I think it was over 6 feet, over 6. I'm not sure what the exact number was or what, but he was just going through and he took his time. And this is a guy who he recruited before, but still, this guy doesn't play on his team, and he's sitting there, he's talking, and it's just it's very impressive. I think Texas A&M basketball has good years ahead. Tennessee will definitely have a challenge coming up this Saturday. They're going to need to step that up in order to get things going in the right way for tournament time. And then after the break, we'll talk about some Lady Vols and some other sports that are going on here. Welcome back into the Checkerboard Chat. I am your co-sports editor, Ryan Cruz. Now we're going to talk about some Lady Vols. So again, since we last talked, the Lady Vols had 2 games. Last Thursday, they faced off against UConn in a resumption of that historic rivalry as part of the Hall of Fame, Women's Basketball Hall of Fame, holding a rival series. Much like the Kansas game for the men, Coach Harper was pleased with her team's play in that matchup. Played well. Much has been the story of their season. They've played up to their good competition, but they've also played poorly against their lower competition. So, continue that same track record. They actually, first half, played probably better than the second half. Were able to get the Lady Huskies big woman, Olivia Nelson Okuda, in trouble. Forced her to create some fouls, got her out of the game, which that's especially helped the Lady Vols because at least in the height department, Tennessee has the edge over UConn. 11 out of Tennessee's 12 players are all over 6 feet. And with Nelson Okuda out of the lineup, if I recall correctly, UConn didn't have would have 5-footers on the court. Tennessee, like they've played with all year when they've had good games, they played with lots of intensity, shot the three okay. Renaya Davis played well, as she has, all year. But ultimately, UConn was able to get things back in order in the second half. slowly took back, especially coming out of the gate, because Tennessee went into halftime with the lead. Closing out well there at the end of the second quarter. But coming out in the third quarter, UConn, obviously, good halftime adjustments, had, started to go on a little bit of a run, took the lead back from the Lady Vols there, and the Lady Vols can never really get it back after that. Now they were able to get a win on Sunday when they returned home. For We Back Pat night, hosting LSU, of course, against a longtime Pat Summitt assistant coach there, and over on the bench for LSU. And of course, the star of Sunday night was Rennia Davis. She had 30 points and just played incredibly well. Jordan Horston continued to play well. Those two have definitely been the driving force for the Lady Vols. And they actually tonight will play. Tonight they play against Vanderbilt over in Nashville. And then this weekend they get to travel to South Carolina with a shot. If they can knock off South Carolina, they will sit top the league for the time being. So that this will definitely be a huge weekend for them. They will definitely need to be ready and on their game. Elsewhere on campus this past weekend, the swim and diving team traveled down to Georgia for a meet there. And actually a matchup that was a ranked matchup on both the men's and women's side. The women were able to get the win, but unfortunately the guys did lose a close one to Georgia. The women's tennis team, the men's and women's tennis teams, both split their two games this weekend. Each of them were playing in kickoff tournaments. The women went on the road to Kansas, where on Friday, I believe, they faced Kansas and were able to get that win. But then on Saturday, unfortunately fell to Virginia. The men kicked off their season this past weekend here in Knoxville. They were opened up their season, or at least, opened up the kickoff weekend with a win over Arizona State on Saturday, but with a 4-0 sweep win. Columbia is whom they faced on Sunday. They lost a close nail-biter. But then, and that just about wraps up action for this past weekend. This coming weekend, the tennis team actually has 3 opponents. On Friday, they will play both Georgia State and Wichita State, or Georgia and Mercer. Georgia State and Mercer on Friday, and then they play Wichita State on Sunday. The also here on campus, the swim and diving team will be hosting their final match of the season. They will be playing Florida, so that be a big senior night. And I believe in a week or two, they will head to Auburn for the SEC championships. Thanks for listening. This has been the Checkerboard Chat.